Your heart stops. The oxygen supply to your brain gets completely cut off. Clinical death has officially begun. But you aren't gone. Instead, you feel a sudden, violent rushing sensation. You are pulled upward, moving at an impossible speed through a dark, hyperdimensional tunnel towards a blinding, magnetic light. You feel an overwhelming sense of peace. You see deceased relatives. You encounter an entity made entirely of unconditional love. And then you are violently slammed back into your physical body as a defibrillator hits your chest. Millions of people across the globe, from every culture and religion, have reported that exact same sequence during a near-death experience. For centuries, the church has claimed this is proof of heaven. But if you look at the original Hebrew texts of the Bible, heaven wasn't an option for you. When you died, you went into the dark. Tonight, we're tracing the evolution of the afterlife. We're going to uncover how a literal trash dump in Jerusalem became the blueprint for hell, and how Egyptian mythology hijacked the biblical narrative. And finally, we're going to look at the declassified CIA consciousness studies and modern neurological research that suggests the light at the end of the tunnel might not be God at all. To put an episode like this together, I have to cross-reference ancient Hebrew translations, Egyptian archaeological records, peer-reviewed medical studies on near-death experiences, and declassified CIA documents. If I tried to organize all of that manually, I would never sleep. That's why the entire research backbone of the main character runs on Highnote AI. Highnote isn't just a transcription tool. It's a hyper-intelligent research assistant. I can dump hours of raw audio, PDF scans of ancient texts, and dense medical journals into the software, and it instantly connects the dots. It builds comprehensive outlines, pulls exact citations, and highlights the overlapping data that I need to build these massive cinematic deep dives. If you're a creator, a student, or a researcher trying to synthesize massive amounts of information without losing your mind, you need to automate your workflow. Click the link in the description to try Highnote AI and let the software do the heavy lifting. Now, let's look at where you actually go when you die. If you ask someone today what happens when they die, they usually give you two options. If you are good, you get the wings, the harp, and a fluffy little cloud. Or, if you were bad, you get the pitchforks, fire, and eternal torture. But if you take that concept back to the original authors of the Old Testament, they would have no idea what you were talking about. Because in ancient Israel, there was no heaven for humans. Heaven was strictly God's domain. And there was no hell. There was only Sheol. Sheol wasn't a place of punishment. It translates roughly to the grave or the pit. It was a shadowy, subterranean waiting room where everyone went. Kings, prophets, murderers, and beggars. In Sheol, you existed as a faint, weak shadow of your former self, cut off from the land of the living and cut off from God. In the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 9, verse 10, it states explicitly, "For there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol where you are going." It was the ultimate equalizer. dust to dust. So if the original text said everyone just goes to the dirt, where did the idea of a fiery underworld of eternal torment come from? It didn't come from a vision. It came from geography. Just outside the walls of ancient Jerusalem is a steep ravine called the Valley of Hinnom. In Hebrew, Gehenna. In Greek, Gehenna. Centuries before Jesus was born, during the reigns of wicked kings like Ahaz and Manasseh, this valley was the site of horrific pagan rituals. The Israelites literally sacrificed their own children by fire to the Canaanite god Moloch in this exact valley. It was a place of unspeakable trauma. Decades later, King Josiah took the throne and instituted massive religious reforms. This ensured that children's sacrifice would never happen there again. Josiah intentionally desecrated the valley. He turned the site of the worst atrocities in Jewish history into the city's massive, smoldering garbage dump. They threw trash, animal carcasses, and the bodies of executed criminals into the valley. To keep the smell down and the disease at bay, fires were kept burning day and night. Sulfuric smoke consistently rose from the ravine. Maggots continuously consumed the rotting flesh. So hundreds of years later, when Jesus is speaking to the Jewish audience in the New Testament, and he warns them about the spiritual destruction, he doesn't use a mystical term. He points to the literal, burning garbage dump right outside their walls. He uses Gehenna as a metaphor. He says, where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched. He wasn't describing an interdimensional torture chamber run by demons. He was just simply saying, if you live a corrupt, destructive life, your legacy will be like the city dump. It was a physical metaphor that got completely misunderstood by history. But if Jesus was just using a metaphor, how did it become literal theology? For that, you have to look at who conquered the world between the Old Testament and the New. Alexander the Great. When the Greeks conquered the ancient Near East, they brought Hellenism with them, and the Greeks did have a divided afterlife. They had the Elysian fields for the righteous, and they had Tartarus, a deep, fiery abyss of torment for the wicked. Over centuries of corruption, Greek mythology slowly bled into Jewish theology. The shadowy, neutral waiting room of Sheol was suddenly partitioned. By the time of the New Testament, Sheol had been divided into two distinct sections: the bosom of Abraham for the good, and the fiery zone for the bad. But the Greeks didn't invent the concept of being judged after you died. The idea your soul goes on trial actually predates the Bible entirely. If you look at the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is texts that existed 1,000 years before the Israelites even formed a nation, you find the weighing of the heart ceremony. When an Egyptian died, their heart was weighed on a scale against the feather of Ma'at, representing truth and justice. Pass the test, and you enter the field of reeds, paradise. Fail, and your soul is devoured by a monster named Ammit, ceasing to exist. The concept of a post-mortem judgment system, heaven, and a lake of fire wasn't a new divine revelation. It was the result of the theological melting pot. Hebrew metaphors, Egyptian bureaucracy, and Greek mythology.
Dave, cut the feed. Cut the mic. Are you telling me that the terrifying lake of fire I've been having nightmares about since I was 7 years old is just a landfill in the Middle East? And the rest of the time, I'm just supposed to sit in a subterranean waiting room as a dusty ghost? What am I supposed to do with this information, Dave? I just spent 4 hours reorganizing my entire life so my heart would be as light as a bird feather. I don't want to get eaten by an Egyptian crocodile demon. And I definitely don't want to spend eternity in a literal dumpster. I'm taking my chances with the Archons, Dave. Unplug the router.
Gil's right to panic, because the ancient texts are a mess of competing mythologies. But in the 20th century, we stopped looking at the ancient scrolls to understand the afterlife. We started looking at the data. Today, the most compelling evidence for an afterlife doesn't come from theology. It comes from the Division of Perceptual Studies, DOPS for short, at the University of Virginia. For decades, researchers like Dr. Bruce Grayson, author of the landmark book After, have documented thousands of verified near-death experiences. And across the Atlantic, Dr. Sam Parnia at NYU Langone has conducted the AWARE study, tracking cardiac arrest patients who report floating above their bodies, accurately describing surgical procedures that happened while they were clinically brain dead. But it wasn't just medical universities looking into this, it was also the intelligence community. In 1983, the CIA declassified a massive report on the Gateway process, a protocol developed by the Monroe Institute based on the work of Robert Monroe, author of Journeys Out of the Body. The CIA wasn't studying religion. They were studying physics. The report theorized that human consciousness is not generated by the brain, but is a complex frequency of energy. By using a proprietary audio technique called the hemisync, they believed humans could intentionally synchronize their brain hemispheres and shift their consciousness outside the confines of space and time. The CIA concluded that the physical universe is essentially a complex holographic matrix. And when the physical body dies, consciousness frequency simply detaches and returns to the absolute in an infinite field of energy. No pearly gates, no lake of fire, just a return to the source code. Okay, let's just stop right there. If you watched episode 11 on the Gnostic Rebellion, I talked about the demiurge and the idea that we are trapped in a spiritual matrix. And I realized after I uploaded it, I completely forgot to include the grounded materialistic counter-argument. I left you hanging with pure esoteric theory. I'm not making that mistake tonight. We have to look at the other side of the coin. Because modern neuroscience has a very different explanation for the near-death experience, and it completely shatters the mysticism. Dr. Rick Strassman, a clinical psychiatrist who conducted groundbreaking government-funded research summarized in his book, DMT, the Spirit Molecule, found a massive biological failsafe built into our hardware. When the human body begins to die, the brain goes into extreme distress, This protects the consciousness from the sheer terror of biological shutdown. The brain releases a massive endogenous flood of dimethyltryptamine, or DMT, one of the most powerful hallucinogenic compounds on Earth. Simultaneously, as your heart stops pumping, your brain suffers from anoxia, which is a severe lack of oxygen. When your visual cortex loses oxygen, your peripheral vision shuts down first, closing in toward the center. What does that look like from the inside? It looks exactly like moving rapidly through a dark tunnel towards a central point of light. The feelings of unconditional love, the encounters with dead relatives, and the sensation of leaving the body? Under this model, it is not a journey into the afterlife. It is a profound, beautifully designed chemical hallucination. Your dying brain is self-administering the ultimate psychedelic trip to ensure that your final moments on Earth are peaceful. The idea of heaven, Sheol, and the Egyptian weighing of the heart. They are all just ancient attempts to make sense of the ultimate unknown. They are human copying mechanisms built to deal with the terrifying reality of our own mortality. But Strassman's DMT research opens a door we cannot ignore. The human brain is capable of producing profound, hyper-realistic spiritual visions via chemical shifts. What does that mean for the authors of the Bible? Next time on The Missing Bible, we're asking the ultimate taboo question. Were the ancient prophets speaking to God? Or are they experiencing altered states of consciousness? We're going to look at the bizarre, hallucinogenic version of Ezekiel, Daniel, and the Book of Revelation. We're going to explore whether the ancient temples of the Near East were actually designed for sensory manipulation and the ingestion of psychoactive compounds. This is the Missing Bible. And whether you believe the afterlife is a shift in cosmic frequency, a divine judgment scale, or just a final, peaceful DMT release before the lights go out, the human desire to understand what comes next is universal. If tonight's episode made you look at the concepts of heaven and hell differently, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. I want to hear from you down in the comments. Do you think NDEs are actual glimpses of the other side? Or are they just the brain's ultimate survival mechanism? Let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Stay open, stay wondering, stay human.
The signal breaks, the monitor goes thin, goes thin, goes thin. A strobe lit rush, where does the light begin? Light begin, does it begin? No harps, no pits, no golden city walls, just the physics where the frequency calls. Frequency calls, frequency calls, the frequency calls. Is it the source or just the brain's goodbye? A chemical ghost beneath the midnight sky. We're woven in the matrix of a golden hum to the ultimate light. We all become. The valley of Hinnom, The trash fire burns. It still burns. Where the worm won't die and the history turns. It always turns. No demon king in a deep stone cage, just a city's waste and a metaphor's rage. The metaphor's rage. Check the pulse, check the wire. Synchronize the hemispheres. Liquid fire in the pinal. Nothing here is physical. DMT, the silver gate. Frequencies are only fate. Stay wondering. Stay open. Stay human. Fading to the frequency.